In the 80s, being fast didn't mean you were good. It meant you were brave. Brave enough to hold the throttle open when the bike stopped feeling stable. You'd hit the brake early because you knew it wouldn't stop in time. These were the motorcycles that didn't reward skill. They rewarded your commitment to bad decisions. The scary part wasn't that they were fast. It was that nothing stopped you from finding out how fast was too fast. Starting this list with BMW K1. The K1 scared people because it didn't feel scary until it was too late. Most fast bikes of the late 80s shook, screamed, or got nervous at high speed, which gave you warning. The K1 stayed calm. The 987cc inline-4 made around 95 horsepower, and the fully enclosed bodywork cut wind pressure so effectively that you could sit at 120 miles per hour feeling like you were doing 80. That composure was the problem. You'd look down and realize you were 20 miles per hour faster than you thought, already past the point where the tires, brakes, or suspension could handle a mistake. Crosswinds hit that big fairing like a sail, and correcting at 140 required constant input just to hold a lane. Tire technology in 1989 couldn't handle sustained heat at those speeds, which meant grip degraded the longer you stayed up there. What it felt like, riders said the bike was too smooth for its own good. You didn't feel speed building because the engine was linear and the wind protection worked. The long wheelbase kept things stable in a straight line, but that same stability made quick corrections nearly impossible once committed. Braking from triple digits put serious strain on the system, and the mass and momentum meant you needed more distance than the bike wanted to give you. Heat from the engine and bodywork became an issue during extended high-speed runs, especially in warm weather. Contemporary reviews called it technically impressive, but deeply unsettling. The bike let you operate comfortably at speeds where a small mistake, a patch of tar, a sudden gust, turned into a real problem. BMW had built something that made extreme velocity feel normal, and that turned out to be more dangerous than making it feel extreme. Second, Yamaha FZ750. In the mid-80s, a 750 wasn't supposed to do 145 miles per hour. That was leader bike territory. Yamaha's Genesis engine with 5 valves per cylinder made around 90 horsepower and had no problem pushing the FZ750 to 148, sometimes 150 depending on conditions. The problem was that middleweight riders suddenly had access to speeds that infrastructure, tires, and their own bikes couldn't support. Quarter-mile times sat around 11.3 seconds, which put the bike in performance territory it had no business occupying. The engine loved high RPM, which meant you stayed up there, where speed accumulated fast and braking distances stretched long. Suspension and tires from 1985 struggled to keep things composed past 130, especially on anything other than perfect pavement. What that meant on the road: riders reported strong top-end pull with weak low RPM response, so you ran it hard to keep pace. The chassis felt stable but stiff, transmitting every road imperfection straight to your hands. Steering was heavy and required deliberate effort at speed, which made quick adjustments difficult. Braking performance was adequate by the standards of the time, but frequently described as marginal when slowing from extreme speeds. Heat and vibration increased during sustained high-speed riding, and the bike never let you forget you were pushing it. The combination of firm suspension and limited wind protection meant longer rides became physically exhausting. The FZ750 proved that engine technology had moved faster than everything else. You could reach speeds that the rest of the motorcycle wasn't designed to handle, and the bike did nothing to warn you until you were already there trying to slow down or change direction. Middleweight performance with litter bike consequences. Coming in at number 3, Suzuki GSXR 750. Suzuki took weight out and left the power in, which sounds great until you realize that suspension, brakes, and tires in 1985 weren't ready for what happened next. The oil-cooled inline-4 made roughly 100 horsepower in a chassis that weighed dramatically less than anything else in the class. Top speed hit 148 to 150 miles per hour, with quarter-mile times around 11.4 seconds, putting it in the same performance range as leader bikes. The problem was that lighter meant less stability. The bike accelerated harder and reached high speeds faster, but it had less mass to absorb bumps, stabilize under braking, or settle the chassis over rough pavement. At speeds that were already pushing the limits of available tire grip, that lack of inertia became dangerous. Actually riding it, riders said it felt exceptionally quick but physically demanding. High-speed stability depended on road conditions and how much you were willing to fight it. Headshake and front-end lightness showed up during hard acceleration or on uneven surfaces. Throttle response was immediate, which meant precise control or you'd upset traction. Braking performance was strong for the period but offered limited feedback, and repeated hard stops brought fade. Once you made a mistake at speed, recovering was difficult because the bike didn't forgive imprecise inputs. The combination of aggressive geometry and firm suspension meant the bike transmitted everything directly to the rider, leaving no room for sloppy technique. The GSXR 750 demanded constant attention and precise execution. It redefined sport bike performance by proving you could make something faster by making it lighter, but it also proved that lighter meant less margin for error, revolutionary engineering that required skills most riders didn't have. Number 4. Honda VF 1000R. Riders described steering that got heavier the faster you went, requiring deliberate physical effort to initiate turns at high speed. The bike felt planted in a straight line, almost too stable, like it wanted to keep going straight, no matter what you asked of it. Honda had built an endurance racer for the street, and that meant prioritizing straight-line composure over quick transitions. The 998cc V4 made around 120 horsepower, with smooth, linear delivery that didn't feel aggressive, but kept pulling consistently through the rev range. Top speeds reached 148 to 150 miles per hour, and quarter-mile times fell around 11.3 to 11.6 seconds, depending on conditions and rider skill. Heat from the engine became noticeable during sustained high-speed runs, and the fairing trapped that heat around the rider in warm weather, making longer aggressive sessions physically taxing. Braking performance was the real limitation. The system worked fine under normal conditions, but slowing from triple digits with all that mass required early planning and committed effort. Repeated hard stops from extreme speeds exposed fade that left riders with less stopping power when they needed it most. The long wheelbase that contributed to stability made rapid corrections difficult once committed at speed. You didn't flick this bike through adjustments, you muscled it, and that took time and distance that emergency situations rarely provided. The combination of substantial weight, racing-derived geometry, and limited feedback meant mistakes at high speeds were hard to recover from once committed. Honda had built something capable of sustained high speeds and comfortable over long distances, but physically demanding to ride at the limit. The V4 smoothness and build quality earned respect, but the bike exhausted riders who pushed it hard consistently. Weight became the defining characteristic at the limit. 5th. Honda CBR 1000F Hurricane. The Hurricane stayed comfortable at speeds where other bikes became unmanageable. Wind protection actually worked, the riding position didn't punish you on longer rides, and the chassis felt stable well past 130 miles per hour. That comfort was the trap. The 998cc inline 4 delivered around 130 to 135 horsepower through smooth, effortless power delivery that encouraged sustained high-speed riding. You'd look down and realize you were at 140 without experiencing the physical feedback that usually came with that velocity. Reduced wind noise, stable chassis behavior, and linear power all combined to mask how fast you were actually going. Top speeds reached 152 to 154 miles per hour, with quarter-mile times around 10.9 to 11 seconds. The problem showed up when you needed to slow down or change direction quickly. Soft suspension tuning and substantial weight meant emergency maneuvers required significant effort and distance. The long wheelbase contributed to straight-line composure, but reduced responsiveness when situations demanded rapid corrections. Heat buildup during aggressive riding became pronounced, particularly in warmer conditions where the combination of engine heat and limited airflow made extended sessions uncomfortable. The soft suspension that made highway cruising comfortable got overwhelmed during hard use, bottoming out or wallowing through transitions. Once committed at high speed, mistakes took more room and time to correct than most situations provided. The tall gearing that allowed comfortable high-speed cruising also meant less engine braking was available during deceleration, placing additional demands on the braking system. Honda had engineered a motorcycle that made extreme velocity feel routine, eliminating the sensory warnings that usually told riders they were operating at dangerous speeds. The bike could reach velocities that exceeded the practical safety envelope without making that clear until something went wrong. Deceptively fast in the most literal sense, and the deception was engineered in. 6th. Suzuki GSXR 1100. Brutally fast and genuinely feared. That reputation came from how quickly the bike could exceed its own ability to manage what was happening. The oil-cooled inline 4 made between 130 and 135 horsepower depending on year and displacement, which grew from 1052cc to 1127 over the production run. But horsepower wasn't the issue. The massive mid-range torque delivery overwhelmed suspension and braking technology available at the time. Roll on the throttle, and acceleration happened violently with little warning. capable of reaching 150 to 155 miles per hour. Quarter-mile times as low as 10.7 seconds put it among the quickest production bikes of the era. Suzuki had paired open-class power with aggressive weight reduction, and the result was a bike that could outrun its own chassis faster than riders could process what was happening. High-speed stability depended entirely on surface conditions. Smooth pavement felt planted. Imperfections caused nervousness that increased with velocity, exposing suspension limitations from the mid-80s. Front-end lift under hard acceleration reduced steering control precisely when you needed it most. Headshake appeared without much provocation, particularly on bumpy surfaces or during aggressive throttle applications. Braking systems struggled relative to the speed and mass they were managing. Riders described needing to plan stops well in advance, because the brakes couldn't match what the engine could do. Heat from the oil-cooled engine was pronounced during sustained operation, making extended aggressive sessions physically demanding. The combination of explosive power, light weight, and limited control systems meant mistakes at speed were difficult to recover from once committed. You could reach velocities that exceeded practical limits of tire grip and frame rigidity before you realized what was happening. Respected for raw performance and racing heritage, feared for how easily it could place riders in situations beyond their skill level. The power to control imbalance was severe. Coming in at number 7, Yamaha VMAX. The VMAX changed the conversation from top speed to instant acceleration. 1198cc liquid-cooled V4 derived from Yamaha's Venture touring platform, making around 145 horsepower with the V-Boost intake system engaged. That system dramatically increased intake airflow at higher RPM, and the power increase was abrupt enough to surprise riders who'd already experienced fast bikes. Quarter-mile times as low as 10.5 to 10.6 seconds made it one of the quickest accelerating production motorcycles of the decade. Top speed was limited to 140 to 145 miles per hour, constrained more by aerodynamics and gearing than power. The danger came from instantaneous velocity gain rather than sustained high speed. At a time when most riders associated risk with top-end speed, the VMAX introduced overwhelming acceleration that could catch you unprepared. The sudden transition when V-Boost engaged felt like hitting a second engine, and that could break traction loose without warning. Behind the bars, riders described violent acceleration that could surprise even experienced motorcyclists. The chassis was stable in a straight line but poorly suited for high-speed cornering due to soft suspension and cruiser-derived geometry. Minimal aerodynamic protection meant the bike wasn't designed for sustained triple-digit speeds. Braking performance was frequently described as inadequate for the speed the bike could achieve in such a short distance. Front-end lift under acceleration was common, reducing steering control precisely when traction was most compromised. The sudden power increase from V-Boost could overwhelm rear tire grip, especially on imperfect surfaces or when leaned over even slightly. Wind fatigue and chassis flex became apparent during sustained high-speed riding. The VMAX earned a lasting reputation as one of the quickest accelerating motorcycles of the 80s, admired for raw power but criticized for control limitations. Fast enough to be legitimately dangerous in unprepared hands, and the bike did nothing to prepare you for what came next. At number 8, Ducati 851. World superbike technology delivered directly to the street before most riders were ready for it. The 851cc liquid-cooled 90-degree V-twin used Ducati's Desmo Quattro 4-valve heads and made around 100 to 102 horsepower depending on year and tune. This marked Ducati's transition from air-cooled 2-valve designs to high RPM liquid-cooled performance, bringing race-level engineering to production bikes. Power delivery emphasized top-end over low RPM torque, paired with close gearing intended for sustained high-speed operation on tracks. Top speeds reached 153 to 155 miles per hour, with quarter-mile times in the low 11s, typically 11.1 to 11.3 seconds, reflecting strong terminal speed, but slower launches than high-torque inline-4 competitors. The chassis was stiff, the geometry aggressive, and feedback assumed competence and experience. Riders coming from softer, more forgiving machines found the 851 uncompromising and rigid in ways that took adjustment. At speed, the bike transmitted every road imperfection directly through the bars and pegs, offering precise feedback but little compliance. The engine required commitment to higher RPM, where speed accumulated rapidly, and braking distances extended dramatically. Power came on hard once the engine reached its operating range, making sudden velocity increases common when you stayed in the power band. Braking performance was strong for the era, but demanded precise modulation and planning, with limited room for error. Heat management was a known issue during aggressive riding, particularly in traffic or warm conditions, where the liquid cooling system struggled to dissipate engine heat effectively. Errors at speed were difficult to correct due to firm suspension tuning and narrow operating windows that punished imprecise inputs. The 851 was regarded as serious race-derived machinery, respected for precision and speed, but widely acknowledged as demanding and unforgiving on public roads. You rode it at race pace, or you rode something else. No middle ground existed with this machine, and that philosophy attracted some riders while intimidating others. Number 9. Kawasaki GPZ 900R Ninja, the bike that reset expectations for what a street motorcycle could do and changed the performance baseline overnight. Kawasaki's 908cc liquid-cooled inline-4 made approximately 115 horsepower, compact and high revving enough to position low in the chassis for improved center of gravity and handling characteristics. This marked Kawasaki's break from air-cooled designs and introduced a new performance baseline that left previous superbikes behind by significant margins. Top speeds reached 150 to 155 miles per hour, with quarter-mile times consistently in the 10.9 to 11-second range, making it one of the quickest production motorcycles of the mid-80s, and faster than bikes with larger displacement. The danger came from accessibility, rather than raw numbers. Riders could access speeds previously limited to race machinery while retaining street manners and usability for daily riding. The gap between capability and infrastructure, roads, tires, braking systems, created risk through approachability rather than intimidation or difficulty. What that felt like? Riders reported strong acceleration across a wide RPM range with noticeable surge as revs climbed toward redline and power delivery peaked. High-speed stability was good by standards of the time, but suspension and braking systems got overwhelmed quickly during aggressive riding or emergency situations. Front-end dive under braking and chassis flex were common complaints at high speed, particularly when pushing the limits. Wind protection was limited compared to later designs, increasing fatigue as velocity climbed, and making sustained triple-digit speeds physically demanding over longer distances. The GPZ 900R earned a reputation as revolutionary, bringing extreme speed to the street earlier than the industry was ready to manage it safely, with supporting technology. Faster than most bikes by a significant margin, yet packaged in a format that encouraged regular use rather than special occasions. That combination of speed and accessibility proved more dangerous than outright aggression or difficulty would have been. Last and the scariest of them all, Kawasaki Ninja ZX-10, the fastest production motorcycle of the 80s and genuinely excessive even by late-decade standards. 997cc liquid-cooled inline-4, producing around 135 to 137 horsepower, with aggressive gearing and a rigid chassis built to maximize straight-line speed. Top speeds documented between 165 and 167 miles per hour made it faster than everything else on the road. Quarter-mile times around 10.3 seconds outperformed nearly every contemporary street motorcycle available. The ZX-10 exceeded the practical limits of control systems available at the time. Speed eclipsed braking capability, tire technology, and suspension refinement. Aerodynamic lift, frame flex, and tire heat became critical factors at velocities where most bikes never operated, often without adequate warning before things went wrong. Riders described relentless acceleration and a sense that the bike constantly asked for restraint. High-speed stability was acceptable on smooth roads, but deteriorated rapidly on imperfect surfaces where most real-world riding happened. Braking required extreme anticipation because stopping distances from top speed were longer than most riders expected or had room to manage. Chassis feedback was limited at very high speeds, making it difficult to sense when you were approaching limits. Heat and vibration increased sharply as velocity climbed, adding physical strain to mental demand. The bike delivered performance that tire compounds, suspension damping, and steering stabilization couldn't fully support. Riders could reach speeds where small mistakes had severe consequences, and the margin for error was narrow. The ZX-10 earned a reputation as excessive, admired for outright speed, but feared for how easily it could overwhelm riders. It proved that you could build something faster than the supporting technology could safely manage, and that gap between engine capability and chassis control defined the experience. Excessive by design and dangerous in practice. Modern motorcycles have closed the gap between what the engine can do and what the rest of the bike can manage, which makes it easy to forget how wide that gap used to be. The 80s were when manufacturers learned that building something faster wasn't enough if you couldn't control it safely. These machines still exist, Some still get ridden hard, and they remain exactly as unforgiving as they were when new. If you've pushed one of these at its limit or you're restoring one now, drop a comment about what that's actually like, because those experiences are worth preserving. And if this gave you a different perspective on why vintage performance bikes demand serious respect, send it to someone who needs that reality check. See you in the next video.